You do sound very professional. Now, one thing I do get off on is when I'm in a professional meeting and people go, "Oh, wow, your microphone sounds really good." And then I have to sadly tell them that I have the most popular kickboxing podcast in the world. And they go, "Is that popular?" And I go, "No, not particularly."
No. But it's not your fault. It's the sport and the people who, maintain and perpetuate the sport. It's their fault. You have the professional media training. You're great.
Oh, get out of here. Come on. You're the guy who runs the sport, from what I've understood in the background.
Pass.
But speaking of the sport, what a stupid week for kickboxing this has been. Like, this is the stupidest week I think we've ever had, right?
Look, they're all stupid to some degree, but it is the breadth of stupidity, the diversity of the stupidity that it is capable of. It's taking.
Let's start with the funniest one where Minoru Kimura got busted for having marijuana on his body, apparently in liquid form or something. It's not really clear what's going on with this, but like he was just standing outside some train station. Like, how much of to bring attention to yourself at a Tokyo train station, you have to actually be messing around, right?
Well, I think he brings attention to himself wherever he goes because he does stand out, especially in Japan. From that perspective, I don't think it was any particular malfeasance on his part. However, I have it on good authority that he stinks. His scraggly little beard and his weird, you saw since he left K-1, he got new tattoos that just look like someone spilled ink on him.
No, I haven't seen this. Let me go to his Instagram.
Okay, yeah. He just got extra tattoos that don't look like tattoos. They look like mistakes. He's an interesting guy. He's, on a personal level, he's a disaster. He's done the least with the most opportunity of anyone from his generation of the sport. Like when this guy left kickboxing, he left it and he went to, he moved from Tokyo to Okinawa shortly after he had joined a kickboxing team, which was essentially built around him and a few other guys. I forget the name. But yeah, like him and Ashizawa and a bunch of guys who sucked. But they had like really good strength and conditioning, as you would expect for a guy like him. Anyway, He decided he was going to be a boxer. Immediately alienated everybody in that industry. Had people, just saying that he was never going to make it. They don't want him to debut. He's just a disaster on a real primal level. And it's unfortunate because when you put him in there with a bum, he can produce some very, very entertaining activities. The issue is he is who he is. This steroid thing I think is so bad. And, this stuff also in a vacuum, not so bad. The issue is he is born and lives in Japan in this particular industry with the employers that he has, knowing that there is a microscope on these people, knowing that there is a microscope on him, and just keeps doing stupid stuff. The funniest thing, have you seen the video?
Of him being arrested? No, I saw the images and it looked like something from a cop's TV show. Like it was someone's camcorder out there or something.
Yeah, someone is like recording him. And there's two funny moments. One is when the guy zooms out and you see someone next to him, like showing a picture of Philip saying like, yeah, this is the guy, which is one, very funny. But two, the other moment is as he's being arrested, he puts his hands together to like, pray and say, come on, just let me off this once.
But you're right in that he has like kind of the opposite frontrunner syndrome of Alistair Overeem, where Alistair would win all of his fights until he got knocked out. Whereas Kimura actually won a bunch of titles and a bunch of impressive matchups, but just can't put it together when he needs to. Like getting knocked out by Charles Bennett? Bro, what the and then losing to Buakaw in a fight that he was winning? Like, this is insane.
Yeah, so the funny thing is he's really only ever turned one fight. Like two, I guess, if you count the Himalayan cheetah fight. But
sure,
the only fight he ever really, got dropped and got back up and got himself into it and won was against Kaisei Kondo, a young man who is essentially already beaten, broken, and done at this point. So, he made him look good, but he is mentally a very fragile man, and I don't really know what else to say about the guy. He exists in this he's in the Genji Umeno dimension at this point. He's just there to be laughed at, and when he's not doing something, to be laughed at, or that gives you a viral 20-second clip or whatever, it's the stuff that happens like on Wajima. If he doesn't knock a guy out in their silly like boxing only rule sets or whatever, did you watch their last thing? It was boring as hell. Nothing happened. So if he's not having some sort of sensational knockout over somebody you have never heard of, or making headlines for something insanely dumb, nobody actually cares about him. Nobody cares what he's doing. So this, I think, I don't know legally what is going to happen, but assuming he comes out the other side of it a free man, I don't think it changes the calculus too much about what exactly he gets booked for and by whom.
It's just so funny. Let's get to the other humorous thing going on. Jamal Ben Saddik get busted for PEDs, but according to his management team, they were saying he had a doctor's note, I think, to help with cancer recovery or something like that. But I don't think they've named the PED in question. But I don't think you use Turnbull for cancer recovery.
I believe it was clomiphene, also known as Clomid, which I believe is typically used for what's called post-cycle therapy. It's also used in certain fertility protocols, usually for bodybuilders. Okay.
Yes.
Yes, he has had a documented battle with thyroid cancer. Whether this constitutes a legitimate medical thing or whether this is, the kind of extra help you get from certain people within the Dutch scene if you are a heavyweight. I think realistically, does the distinction matter? No. Performance-enhancing drugs are a just natural part of the sport. And on the one hand, I feel like it shouldn't be punished too hard. But on the other, if you are in the only organization that is realistically punishing people for this, a basic part of your job is to have all your T's crossed, all your I's dotted, and not pop for this stuff repeatedly. It is essentially an IQ test, and he is failing it constantly. And he will have these, public outbursts against ostensibly his employer because there are people in the back rooms that like him, and there are equally the same number of people who dislike him. And he is a problem for them. And he makes problems for them on, one of the only things that makes any kind of difference for them, which is social media, because he does have a lot of fans and they do want to see him fight. But, he's just causing them headaches all the time and causing himself headaches because he is too stupid to do his job correctly. The moral dimension of this, I don't care. He should be free to do this, whatever. The guy he really wants to fight is Rico. And Rico is, as clean as anything that is going down a toilet. But who cares ultimately? But that aside, is if you sign the contract and this is part of what you are required to do to maintain your fighting career, do it. And if you're too stupid to do that, then I'm sorry, but you will keep getting stomped on by Glory with their silly rules, and you get 10, 12 months out. I really don't have a lot of sympathy, especially in the context of showing up to events that he's not fighting on and trying to ring. He's very lucky that because he would be back for life if this was the Bebop Law Day.
Yeah, it's just one weird story after another, and it's just he hasn't fought in, I want to say, 3 or 4 years now, but he's been arrested 3 or 4 times in that time for really for things like people say he's been framed, but it doesn't seem like he's being framed. I don't want to get into organized crime in the Netherlands too much, but we do cover kickboxing, so most of it is organized crime in the Netherlands.
Yeah, the case of Hesty, right?
I know Hesdy Jurges, but I don't know his case. I actually don't know.
So he was arrested. Now, I might be getting the number mixed up, but there was him and there was Ashwin Balrak. Now, these are two different people. They committed, allegedly, the same crime of trafficking very large quantities of cocaine. One of them was around 80 kilos. The other was around 120. So a lot of drugs. So Hesty manages to get off, proclaims his innocence, but gets, I guess, a suspended sentence or whatever it's called, where it's crimes for the next few years and you won't go to it. And there's a lengthy history of a very lenient justice system in Holland. Anyway, during this time, he writes a book. And after this time is over, the book gets published. And it's like, yeah, I did it.
Oh God, just amazing. What a good sport we cover, eh? But
he can proclaim his innocence as much as he likes, but he had whatever this weird phone thing going on was. I would be shocked to my very core if there were just some, convoluted and detailed conspiracy against Jamal Ben Saddik. I think the simplest explanation really serves its better here.
Well, it just keeps happening over and over. One time, maybe you get framed. I don't know. Stuff happens. We're on like incident 5. It's just less and less of a coincidence over time, right?
Yeah, that, or there is a shadow cabal out to get him, but they have very few ideas.
We've missed you, man. Why don't you come back to kickboxing and do a weekly podcast every week? Are you not busy? Come on.
Because I would rather get a colonoscopy than edit a podcast. So
no.
To your listeners, if there is anyone out there hearing that who thinks, you know what, this sounds like my skill set. I am an out-of-work gastroenterologist. Like, get in touch with Tim. We'll get a colonoscopy set up.
Let's get into the K-1 card, which on paper looks kind of memey, but once you really get into it a little more, you can see that it is even more memey than we initially expected.
I'm really glad you weren't going to try and convince me that, within this there was a heart of gold, but it is, yeah.
I will say there's like 2 good fights. 70 kilogram. Actually, all the 70 kilogram fights are actually pretty good, but that's not headlining it. It's this open weight, which I love the idea on paper, but the execution leaves a little to be desired, right?
Yeah, I mean, it took them very little time to put together a competent and interesting 70 kilogram division.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same amount of time, or actually, a longer period of time, their heavyweight division has, one new guy and the rest of the same guys that were just sort of COVID era guys. It's, it is pretty depressing on paper.
Let's get into it. K-Jee looking to break his knockout losing streak against Jerome Le Banner, who was an old man when he was competing, like in the 2009 Grand Prix. He was the grandfather of the division at that point, and he's still fighting and coming off wins somehow. This is ludicrous. I think like Jerome might win.
So, yeah, like probably 20 years ago, nearly something like that, when I first started, watching kickboxing, he had a tremendous amount of goodwill because his rivalry with Mark Hunt was in very recent memory, but it also had a horrific arm break against Ernesto Host.
Yep.
At which point, he came back very quickly, but was fed a, procession of bums essentially for at least a year, and had like very serious side effects lingering from that arm. And now it is 2024. And I see an announcement saying, Jerome Le Banner is fighting, not just fighting, is headlining a card. And my immediate reaction is, that's insane. He is like 50 years old. And then I look it up. He's 51, nearly 52. Now, I don't want to pretend that this is a compelling bout. It's not, but there's a tendency to be like mean and snarky. So, and I'm aware that I do this. I want to be completely serious and like deadpan about this. K-Jee is not a good fighter.
No.
There's no two ways about it. Jerome is 51 years old. The fact that it is, competitive in any way is a damning indictment. So, yeah, the trouble is either of these guys could win. One of these guys will win, and that will send one of these into a tournament in December. And it's kind of embarrassing to have either of these people turn.
It's so funny and it's so embarrassing. I know I try not to be snarky because I feel like everyone really tries to be snarky all the time, especially on like Twitter spaces. So I try to be a little bit more positive, but it's very hard to not be snarky about this as like Jerome Le Banner fought like Rick Rufus in his prime. Like that was 25, 30 years ago at this point.
Yeah, like, one of the things that kind of bothers me about the way the return of not just him, but they keep referring to Errol Zimmerman as a legend. Now,
come on,
Errol Zimmerman, he is a guy who fought in K-1 at a certain period of time. I wouldn't call him a legend. Jerome is a legend. Like,
yes,
if you think of any former in kickboxing, especially, kickboxing at heavyweight, he has fought them. There is a very high likelihood he has knocked them out, probably multiple times. Like, he is a foundational figure in kickboxing. The fact that he never really retired, he's been a bit difficult to work with, and that makes me concerned in several ways. So, I spoke just a moment ago about his rivalry with Hunt. Now, they fought 3 times. Hunt said at one point that each time he fought him, he lost 10 years of his life. So they set them up to fight a 4th time. Are you aware of this?
No, I did not.
So you will know what happened because Mark Hunt had somebody called Melvin Manhoof.
Oh, this was like in Dream or something like that, right?
Yeah. So Jerome agreed to a fight. He turned up and then he said, "Oh, I've got the flu." And it is very, very likely at that point in time that really he wanted a vacation and he wanted to see Tanigawa and say, "Where is my money?" And he had kind of a reputation as a diva. And you will note that I don't think he's done any media for this appearance, which is at this point in a few days. So do we actually see him fight in the main event? I would say more than likely he does, but there is a non-zero chance that he just doesn't. There is an even greater chance that, assuming K-Jee doesn't just clobber him in the first round and try and get him out of there, that he has a little hissy fit about something, walks out the ring. It is very fraught. It is very difficult to get a good outcome from this bout for both him, for the promoter, for his opponent. And, I haven't actually looked at this card, how many of these heavyweight bouts they have, but there is the extra wrinkle that one of the qualifiers is also fighting for glory on December 9th, and the tournament is supposed to be December. When is their final? Anyway,
I want to say December or something like that.
Yeah. The point is, Milos Svetichanin is probably not going to fight in glory and then immediately fly to Japan and fight in K-1. So the best case scenario in this bout, honestly, is that it goes off without any sort of, massive out of the ring problem occurring. But then they realize, oh, we need an extra guy. And both of these guys end up going through. It's entirely possible. It's going to be a pretty stupid state of affairs, no matter what happens.
This is so stupid. Well, I think Jerome Le Banner hasn't done any media because he's a 51-year-old man with a broken arm permanently. Like, I don't think he can open his computer. Imagine sending this guy a Zoom link. What is he going to do with a Zoom link, man?
I mean, he's famously prickly. And he was my favorite fighter for a long time, but he can be pretty difficult to work with. And he had, a lot of goodwill because of things he had done in the ring. But, because he never really retired and he had this prolonged, he has these absences from kickboxing, and he sort of did his own events in France for a while. He would turn up in places like Nagoya. I don't think he costs a tremendous amount to book, but the reason he does not always get offers and get booked is because he can be difficult to work with. But also, like the business case for involving him in this event, like the crowd that you're drawing do not remember or care about this man. The guy you're putting him in against is not a regional favorite in Osaka. He's, they've headlined events in Fukuoka with him, but, aside from that, he's also on this tremendous losing streak. It's just very odd stuff. And it also is like the building blocks for a tournament that has had a pretty difficult gestation so far.
But on paper, I love the tournament idea. We do regional tournaments, and then the winners will go to the big tournament, and we have the last year's tournament. Great, love it. That's very cool. That's very reminiscent of 1990s K-1. The execution, on the other hand, has been, the Brazil one kind of was great, and that's about all I could say.
Yeah, so the Brazil stuff was done by Paulo Zarello, but they run a good show already.
Yeah,
like the WGP stuff. If you, within Europe at least, are ever up late enough or canny enough at stealing things on the internet to watch, it's pretty good. They, it's worth the watch. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I've never heard a good word about their other promoter, Javad Podrak. Like his shows just look awful. Everything was dreadful. It was so just sloppy. But the idea is fine. But there is a fundamental problem in that they did all this in the wake of Glory holding a tournament with a very significant prize pool. So any heavyweight who believed in themselves and had a good enough manager was already snapped up. So you essentially have the hope that you are going to find some undiscovered talent in the worst weight class. And it simply didn't happen.
I like that with the Eastern tournament, Glory, like you said, signed the winner. That was great. And then the Western tournament was Reese Brudadel, who was on the road to one, and then Glory signed him, so he wins the K-1 Grand Prix, and then Glory doesn't sign him this time. They just don't like Reese for some reason.
Yeah, so it's well, also, we glossed over the New York.
Oh, that's right too. Yeah. They think nothing happened in New York.
Yeah, that just completely fell apart. And I guess they kind of, they always had the backstop that this event was not going to be a qualifying tournament, but it would have these individual qualifying bouts, which means that they had some leeway to sort of solve some of those problems should they occur. And I had high hopes based on, the Max tournament that they would be able to find some compelling people. Mm-hmm. And instead, it's just the same guys they book over and over again, plus Errol, Zimmerman, and Jerome. It's complete, it's a real letdown because they have shown that when they put their heads together and they think and they do some scouting and they plan, that it can go pretty well. Like the Max tournament and their resulting division from that, I think is very, very interesting and very, very worth watching. Mm-hmm. This, I know it has the inbuilt Achilles heel of being heavyweight, and it's very difficult to find a talent pool that has been, undiscovered. But,
yeah, like you said, that 70 kilogram is. I'm excited for the fights on this card from that tournament. It's actually surprisingly good. But yeah, heavyweight. But I don't know why they just went to New York, and the New York Commission, which is notoriously quite conservative with these things, just said, no, I don't think so. And then K-1 went, well, that's the only place in the United States of America. I guess we'll throw in the towel.
Yeah, so they mentioned on their, I guess now dead, potentially, podcast that they had some feelers for a network event in America. I know that one of their events, maybe it was the Max tournament, maybe something
Mhm.
else, had Scott Coker as a guest.
Oh
So
yeah, he used to
there
promote
was
K1 USA before he was in
exactly,
Strikeforce.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So now that the old people at the top are worming their way back in, a lot of old names are coming back, both front of house and back of house. But I wouldn't be surprised to see them doing some kind of federated show in California potentially, but I very much doubt it. Vegas, but more likely California. But
yeah.
also, I think they have a lot of lofty plans. Their ability to service those plans relies on the world essentially not having moved at all since 2012, which is just not the case.
But that is actually a major issue where like even companies now we're in that right now. I think we're in a little bit of a transitionary zone where digital media. Sorry, if you are someone who is producing some sort of product in a digital media space, you don't entirely know how your consumers are looking to use it. Like pay per view is not really it. Even looking at it on YouTube is not really it. Like I don't envy K1 trying to get new fans where a lot of their original fans were in the US at least were up at 3 in the morning watching ESPN by accident because that's where it was for a while. Like it's just I think it's very hard to get in front of people when there's so much going on, right?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to a guy who does VFX, and I put it to him that in terms of movies, there's never been more and it's never been worse. And, his
Mhm.
response was one, it keeps him employed, but two, that it may not be good for individual businesses or products or movies or whatever, but it is good ultimately for the next generation of people coming up in that industry where there are a tremendous amount of opportunities and they may not be, well paying or whatever. But when you consider when FEG died and
Mhm.
you had Crush running very small shows in very small venues, to essentially an audience of people who bought tickets and stuff could filter out on pay television a month after the fact or whatever. Like it
Mhm.
was a land of very little opportunity. But now, like everything is sort of subsidized by Abema one way or another. But
Mhm.
if you are trying to, make a career for yourself in kickboxing in Japan, people can get to see you, whether they pay or not, whether that is good for the businesses or not. Not good. But in terms of getting a foothold in the sport that you want to be a professional in, whether that is a realistic goal at this point, you need to be supported by something else. But that
Yeah.
proliferation, it has a problem in that it is fundamentally it funnels to a needle point, and the needle point that we saw was the match. Like we managed to support one big pay-per-view event, and it's just not repeatable, not at least for a generation, until like a very specific confluence of circumstances happens. And I don't imagine it will happen again, honestly, but I didn't imagine
Mhm.
that that one would happen. Like who knows what's going to happen in the future. But the point is, yeah, there's a fundamental tension in the business, which is that, everybody wants these giant big shows, money making opportunities, but you have to manufacture them. And that's really a long game. And the people involved in the long game are not always aligned. Um, and it's not something you can just make happen by running the same playbook from 20 years ago, because you
Yeah.
can like do this sort of direct to consumer marketing with very small scale pay-per-view, and some people make it work and they make money. And I don't think K1 has really squared the circle yet of what they want to do with their, they're chasing a consumer that doesn't exist. They have consumers who do exist but are very hard to monetize, and they haven't quite found the formula.
See, this is why I brought you on. I didn't want to do any work. This is far easier just pitching questions to you. But in a way, like K1 does feel very much stuck in the same place. Like it targets people like you and I who love the Kokataki boom and Michael Chavello. Like, the three of us would just nerd out about how fun that era was. But it feels like K1 is still exactly still in that era and hasn't moved on. Whereas Ryzen has made an effort very much at the micro level to build up the sport, and they have found a very good niche market. Whereas I do feel like Big K1 really hasn't moved out from that that niche. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So this is something I spoke about pretty recently, which is what has surprised me about Ryzen
Mm,
is that everything is a moving target for them. Like, when they started, I guess the idea was, we'll do Pride 3, we'll go to
yeah,
Saitama, we'll do this stuff. But, then a guy like Tenshin comes along and they have some flexibility
yeah.
and they decide, we'll do kickboxing, whatever. And then, bare knuckle stuff comes along. They'll do a bit of that. They will go where the money leads them.
Mm,
And I don't know what kind of analytics they use, but they have been actually very successful. I assumed when they were doing this stuff that they were just flailing and trying to find something that would stick. But I think actually they have a nimbleness that these other organizations don't. Like they're not stayed, they're not stuck in one place. They're willing to be experimental. And I think
mhm,
that works out for them. K1 is experimenting, but they're experimenting backwards. They're not forward facing.
mhm,
They had something that was working very well for them in the pandemic with a very small number of people doing all of the heavy lifting. They would
mhm,
regularly get 3.2 million viewers, with an asterisk on the way Abima counts these things. But they
mhm.
were doing well. They were filling to, the extent that they would have seats, the arenas that they were running in. And it was a good product. And it was, one of the more, if not the most, and definitely one of the most entertaining fight sport products that there was.
Yeah,
However, that era has very clearly come to an end for them naturally with the leaving of Takeru, but
yeah.
also now that the business has fundamentally changed to be more internationally focused. Unfortunately, the people that are, largely in charge of that are doing things like reaching very, very far back in the wardrobe and pulling out their old suits. And it's Jerome Le Banner, it's Errol Zimmerman, it is that nostalgia just doesn't work for the audience that they have at home. And I don't think it really works abroad very much either, with the exception of Buakau, who, has become a sort of analytics problem unto itself. But yeah, like I think they need a new audience, but I don't think they quite know which direction to go in to find that.
There are certain fighters like Buakaw and Badr Hari who I don't know that their fans actually ever watch them fight as much as I don't know that any other people have been propelled by shorts, like YouTube documentaries where people just make stuff up about them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like Buakau, a lot of the stuff he says is simply not real.
Yeah.
But also the endless conspiracy surrounding him. I think people enjoy engaging with that much more than they do engaging with his actual fights. Like it doesn't matter that his competitive prime was a long time ago. I mean, his
Mhm.
longevity is really, really amazing. His longevity is not
Sure.
what's discussed. What's discussed in the comments section of anything, regardless of whether it's K1 or, whatever weird Cambodian thing that he was fighting on. It is purely the circumstances, mysterious or not, which were forced upon him by shadowy figures. If he loses by knockout to Yoshihiro Sato, that never happened. That was actually, he accepted money and it was fine that he did that because it was organized crime. And it's very interesting, but it is completely unmoored and self perpetuating at this point. So it doesn't really matter who he fights, what he does, what he says. There will be a naturally forming narrative based entirely on these, self-repeating claims. They changed the rules. Did you hear
Yeah.
this? Like they changed the rules. This happened in what, like 2006. He has a fight in 2024, and they will say they changed the rules just before this one. It's like that was 18 years ago, and it's still somehow happening. So I don't think he does anything for you as a promotion if you book him. Like
Mm.
the extra eyes will not pay you a penny. And in fact, the narrative that they finalize upon will probably paint you in a bad light and everybody will believe that. But also, those people don't matter. They're not
Yeah.
doing anything for you. It is fascinating on a sociological level, but you know,
There is a quality to certain viewers, and I've always said that, like, your Badr Hari and your Buakaw viewers are the worst that you could hope for, you know?
yeah. And who are they courting? They are courting the Buakaw viewer. I am sure if Badr Hari was available, they would be booking him.
Yes, they would. Absolutely. Now, you did say one thing there, that during COVID, you know, you still get an entertaining product, and that's really due to the fact that kickboxing is a really entertaining product. You can put any two dorks in there, and you will get a really fun, exciting product out of these two men, except for when it comes to Sina Karimian and Claudio Istrate, who had one of the silliest, memeiest fights, I think, in kickboxing history, and now we get to run it back one more time, the fight that nobody wanted. Am I right?
No, you're exactly wrong. I wanted this.
Come
The
on.
promoters wanted this. And I think, you know, again, I'm like you, I don't want to always be snarky, but Claudio Istrate has never really, you know, clicked with me. I don't think he's all that great. He's the rare combination of not that good and difficult to work with. You know, he had a close fight, which I don't know. I don't remember if they scored it a draw or a decision loss for him on the Eastern Europe show.
Oh, yeah, and
he,
then he walked out.
yeah, he walks out and then immediately starts recording videos saying that it's fixed and that fuck K-1, and you know, saying his promoter is like ruining his career and fixing fights, when anyone who watched it was not impressed by him. Like,
Yeah.
he didn't win that fight anyway. So then he gets, you know, talked to, and they smooth things over, and they give him another fight in Japan with Wajima, which he loses by decision and looks bad in. And now they give him this fight, which, you know, again, something I have been saying is that while Sina Karimian looks goofy, he does very funny things in the ring. He looks quite uncoordinated. He is actually better, I would say, than the baseline heavyweight.
Okay.
Like,
Yep.
his chin, not great, but you knock him down, he will get back up and he will try to win. There are several guys on this card who are also heavyweights who you knock them down and that's it. They may get up, but they're not trying to win.
Yeah.
Now, Karimian, you know, he did fight was it Karim Jamai? I forget his name. Anyway, the guy from Germany. And he did win that fight. And then he went on and he fought Istrate. And he would have won that fight if he could shut up, but he could not. So he was like constantly berating him while Istrate was, you know, having a little hissy fit and trying to get the referee to take a point. And this is another thing that only him and Big Mike Passenier have really glommed onto, which is that this is the thing the great Luke once said, is that the referees embody no authority in the ring.
Yes.
And you can essentially just complain loudly and long, and if you know, they're not going to disqualify you if you're complaining to them. They will get a guy to translate and say, what the hell is he saying? The translator will say, oh, he's upset about this. You need to, you know, like Karimian got clobbered by Lutza, and Big Mike is like yelling, saying, that was the back of the head. That was late. Like, you know, whatever, all of this. And you watch the replay and no, it was absolutely fine. But because he's been complaining, they say, okay, have it your way. You know, it's fine. You didn't get knocked down. And, you know, in that case, it was probably a dangerous thing to do, but you can keep yourself in the fight. You can get extra points just by being annoying. And Istrate, you know, that's a quality he has. Sina is a very hot-headed guy who is going to be very annoyed by this. I think this is, you know, I don't remember the exact timing, but their first fight was supposed to be, you know, 9 minutes long with a couple of breaks in between.
Yeah.
I believe it ended up being 27 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think this is probably going to be a repeat of that.
It's the stupidest, but also, like, you're gonna go like to the death. Sina Karimian going to the death with Claudio Istrate? Like, just beat him already. He's not that good.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, it was a tremendous experience the first time, but I do question whether you just go to the well one too many times. Like, you could put Sina in with anybody and he will have an entertaining fight. Whether it is, good on a deeper level is a different question. But, I don't think they needed to bring Istrate back. I don't think he deserved to be back. I don't think there's, a compelling reason for him to be here beyond the fact that their first fight, if it went to a round, which it would have done if Sina making fun of him during the break.
Potato. Called him a potato and lost because of it.
Yeah, like he would have won the extra round. Istrate has no cardio. And so I think it's Sina's fight to lose, basically, as many of his are. And the question is, will he do it? If he does, with what amplitude does he do it?
I think this is a Sony Morbius situation where we memed this back into existence because the people up top misinterpreted all of our tweets being snarky about this fight. They thought, oh, these guys are really popular, we'll rematch them. No, not at all. That's not it.
No, I think it has a sort of dark allure to it, but also, on the analytics side of things. So the way Abim works, they actually have to the second analytics. So they know who is watching what. And a lot of the decisions about whether a card requires, they tried to do a K-1 pay-per-view. That comes from Abima. That doesn't come from K-1. Now the product, they're trialing it on the premium service. So you do have to buy, but it's a subscription for a small amount monthly. So I think they need to be really more joined up because Abima know what people are watching. We know that they've had some meddling in matchmaking before. If this is their doing, I start to question the value of such granular analytics. And I don't know where the pressure for this rematch came from, but it is very curious. And I'm sure it will be entertainment because Sina is the most gifted physical comedian on the planet. And I would like to see him, do his job against other people. Like he made a masterpiece the first time. It was unbelievably funny when they had a protracted break. I forget whether it was groin kicks or complaining. And the very first thing that happened, groin kick. It was lost my mind. It was so funny. And it is like part of the character that they are giving him. They call him the full body, which is great. Like they have found a way to make someone in their, noise break through as signal. It's in a very negative way, but it is a way. But like, don't keep repeating that. Like history has shown you pop a big rating with Bob Sapp versus a fat guy, whatever. The good times don't roll. Like you need to be nimble. You need to be moving. You need to find where the viewers are going to meet you, not plant your flag and build your house somewhere and then find that the sea level is rising and your company is dead.
But you say that, but everything that Bob Sapp did actually drew ratings. Like that's one of the worst examples you could have picked of like he had repeat success despite not being a serious fighter after like 2004 or whatever it was. Like he hasn't been a serious fighter for years, but those ratings for Bob Sapp never stopped,
No, the ratings peaked with Akebono.
Yeah.
And then after that, they kept going to the well. They kept trying to find bigger, fatter guys, and people lost interest in the product. They would have, some success, but then it ends. Like it is a very fad-driven society, and it doesn't last. And then if you were just trying to say, look, it's Bob Sapp over and over again, you end up, getting, what was that Egyptian guy?
Are you talking about not Hesdy Jurges? No.
The Egyptian guy that Bob Sapp fought under shoot boxing rules in Ryzen.
Oh, give me a fucking second. Jesus. That could be anybody. You got to be way more specific.
Yeah. Anyway, the point is, like, you can keep dragging him out and it's, it might have some effect, but it is diminishing returns. And I think even if you have gotten some, mild social media interest from quite frankly, the demonic forces of the very antisocial NEETs in Japan who watch this stuff and find it funny. I don't think it is a sustainable bump, and I think you do need to move on and find something different for Sina to do.
As for Bob Sapp opponents, are you talking about Dorgor Shuregjin Sumei Bazar, who went on to be a Mongolian parliament member?
I am certainly not.
He just fought. They just like drew names out of a hat for his opponents. Like he fought everybody at various points, right? Like just one of the best careers. I was going to interview him a while back, actually, but he sent back a question to us being like, do you guys really know who I am? Can you tell me 3 facts about Bob Sapp? And I was like, you know what? Forget it. I actually don't care that much.
Wow, was I wrong? Was it? I might be wrong. 1 second.
Come on. No, you're not.
No. Osunarashi. Yeah.
Okay.
Retired sumo wrestler from Egypt. Okay.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, I see it here.
Yeah. Anyway, the broader point is, Sina Karimian is not going to have mainstream success. He is not going to appeal to the people that they generally try to appeal to with their product. He can bring them some notoriety, but I don't think they should, keep repeating that. Like, try and put him in with someone else. I don't think the rematch is appropriate or needed. It will be very funny, but like, please don't turn this into a rivalry. I don't need a trilogy. Let him ply his trade.
Okay, let's move to the other fights. Errol Zimmerman, like you said, he was never a golden boy of K-1. He was a mid-level fighter for his whole career, and he just fought some of the better guys and lost to them. He is now the belly smusher, and he's going to be fighting Shota Yamaguchi, who is a Kyokushin karate fighter, and no one has explained to him what kickboxing is because he just Kyokushin karates in every fight.
So the mark against Zimmerman, even back in the 2000s, was that he is fat and lazy.
Yes.
And watch, his fight with Badr Hari. He hits him with this tremendous overhand right, and he still has that power. The problem is that he is now older and fat and lazy. But he does carry a lot of weight. Like, that's not all, lean weight, but he is a big guy. Shota Yamaguchi is honestly one of my favorite Japanese cruiserweights. He's he's just through and through a Kyokushin guy. But also, I wouldn't say he has no filter, but he has very little filter. That has made it quite difficult for him in his short career. He's, he will just like see something on Twitter about, a young fighter or whatever, quote it and be like, anyone who makes a child cut weight is a bastard. Like, he has very strong opinions about everything. And I suggest to everybody listening to this who is not, familiar with this man, go and watch his fight with Ryunosuke Hoshi. I forget if it was a year ago or something, but he gets dropped, I believe, in the first round by a guy who is bigger and more athletic, but
and better and a better fighter in every way.
No, not at all.
Come on.
No, Yamaguchi is like, he is a real throwback karate guy. He doesn't really belong at cruiserweight, and as such really doesn't belong at heavyweight. But unlike some of these other guys, if you knock him down, he is still going to try to win. So I am actually quite interested in how he does with like a big weight deficit, and probably the same kind of power deficit that he had against Hoshi. So he's an Osaka guy, I believe. Is this the co-main or?
Co-main, yeah.
Yeah, so he's not really, popular. He doesn't have the slick, smooth media training. You put a microphone in front of him, he will say something that will probably bristle against at least half of the crowd. But he's cool. I like his style. I really don't know how this is going to go because while I did watch like some of Errol's recent fights the last few years, like his cardio and his willingness to do much has always been somewhat suspect. So, like in that Badr Hari fight, it seemed like he had won, and then Badr gets up and he gets back into the fight because he is, or at least was before he became a lot more frail, a real demon. Like if you knocked him down, he was going to try and kill you. And
Mhm.
Zimmerman, I don't think has ever really been. His heart is not that kind of guy. Although, when he got spinning back kicked by Radio Pacic, I was really surprised that he didn't go out. So,
Yeah.
he's very hard to put away. Um, but also he is who he is. It could get pretty sloppy, but I do think just on the basis that he's very big and he can still hit hard, that is going to cause real problems for a guy who, ultimately I think is going to try and show a valiant performance. Whether he wins and makes it ugly,
Mhm.
I don't know, but there is a chance because Yamaguchi, I wouldn't say he's, I don't know all that much about karate, but it has been explained to me that he's kind of very, very good at the level that he was at, not like world beating, but he has a tenacity that a guy like Seiya Tanigawa doesn't. So there is a
Mhm.
chance that you see a sort of dramatic comeback from him and he really gets the crowd going. And then he gets on the mic and says something that, might annoy 25% of the crowd.
No, like Shota Yamaguchi, he's at least entertaining because he is full acceleration with no defense, right? Like he just runs at his opponents, basically, is how I kind of broke him down. And he's trying to get in phone booth exchanges. And like even against an Errol Zimmerman, you might just end up playing into his game by running at his punches, you know?
Yeah, it's entirely possible. Like he did get dropped against Hoshi, but I'm pulling for him. I really actually enjoy his style, and I think of the people that could potentially go forward into this year-end tournament, uh, if the choices are K-Jee, Jerome Le Banner, Errol Zimmerman, Yamaguchi, Istrate, Sina, like yeah, he's not a bad pick.
All right, let's move down the card. Seiya Tanigawa is going to be taking on the Korean Kwon Jangwon. I like Kwon Jangwon quite a bit. He's actually quite good, isn't he? He's got great hands, Korean Muay Thai, but
I think he's
he
got
should,
like a pretty bread and butter style, but
yeah.
he's big in a way that, for example, the super heavyweights that they were booking during COVID,
Mhm.
Kosuke Jitsutaka or Jitsukata, I forget. Anyway, they had, like big fat guys, and he's a little wobbly. He's not, the slimmest guy you've ever seen, but
Sure.
he's real physically big, not just like fat physically big.
Yes.
And you see that when he fights, like, even if he gets a bit slow and pendulous with the hands, there's a lot behind that. When he throws
Mhm.
leg kicks, they are very meaty. And
Mhm.
Tanigawa is a guy who is just frankly frail. Like, he does not wear the hits well. He's been getting hit too much. He's been doing it for too long, and he's been doing it at too high a weight. Like, he
Mhm.
just dropped down to 75 kilos and lost there because he was too frail. And now he's going back up against a guy who is, again, like comfortably over 265 pounds, a
Yeah.
little doughy, but not a big fat guy. He's just stocky, big. And I don't think it goes well for Tanigawa.
No, I completely co-sign with you. Like Kwon is, I'm a huge fan of Kwon. I like watching him fight quite a bit. I actually think Kwon probably wins this match easily and does quite well in the year-end tournament. Like Lucy is really the only person who's qualified with much talent, right?
I think Brudenell is okay. Svetichanin is very good, a bit
He
small,
is.
but probably not turning up. Um,
Yes.
the Ariel Machado is okay, but he's on very much the tail end of his career. We already
Yeah.
saw him against Lutza, and uh, did he fight the Polish guy in that very very tedious affair? I think so.
Oh yes, he did. Yeah, one of the worst fights I've ever. He fought the that was the champion in KOK, and I forget his name now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's not a very enticing field at the moment. And how many? Yeah, let's count. How many qualifiers are there? Because presumably Milos is not going to be there, so they need to pick an
Yeah.
extra guy. So we
Yeah.
have 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so potentially the loser of any of these bouts could end up in the tournament,
Great.
or they could find someone else. I don't know who that might be, but potential.
Amazing. Amazing. I mean, great. I mean, and look, I do want this to work and I do want it to be exciting, but that all timelines lead to Lucy getting a second title.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
But also, he's good. He obviously has talent and physical ability in a way that a lot of heavyweights do not. But we have also just seen him against Mahmoud Satari, who is, a very athletic guy, but has a very poor training situation. And, Lutza won comfortably, but he didn't put him away. He didn't, really put a stamp on it. So I think a lot of his profile as this, giant finisher has been somewhat enhanced by the kind of chaos of tournaments and the people that he has faced in them. A worn down Ariel Machado, Claudio Istrate. He's very clearly higher than the baseline heavyweight, but also, I see potential there for, depending on whether they can find someone else, whether Reese Brudenell really has something we haven't seen from his fights previously, whether, whether he picks up an injury or an accidental clash of heads or something and gets a welt over the eye, a cut that he needs to protect. Like, things could change. The thing is, those are not very compelling circumstances. If I tell you, like, oh, the presumed winner might not totally win because something stupid and random might happen. Like, it's not a real good elevator pitch,
No. Well, I will say Mahmoud Satari is some nights he's really good. I will say that. Some nights he's not, though. He's a little bit mixed, isn't he?
I think, he has a problem that a lot of people, I don't know how much of this card we're going to talk about, but he doesn't have people his own size to spar with.
Right.
He doesn't spar predominantly in a kickboxing gym. He runs his own camps. And so, you get that he has all of the athletic ability in the world. But if you're going to be, comfortably and charitably 85 kilos up against, big fat 120 kilo guys, run in, throw a punch and back out straight with your arms down. They're just physically bigger humans. They can catch you on the way out. And, that's what happens. So I think, and I've said this, a few years now, that it would be really nice to see him, do some training in Europe, fight lower level European heavyweights, get that kind of experience that he never got to have, doing Muay Thai tournaments internationally or fighting in Japan. And I think, he's had, an unusual start to his career. He's already, fairly up there age-wise. He's also not really a heavyweight, but, we're sort of off track here. But yeah, I think he has, ability and talent, and there are things to celebrate about him, but also there are just structural obstacles in his way where it's probably both too late and too difficult in, being a large man in Japan for him to fix at this point.
Well, I do love that we wasted a lot of time talking about the stuff that you and I had very little interest in. But so let's get to the good fights and we'll just power through them. So Stoyan Koprivlenski back after his K-1 Max win. He's going to be taking on the Crush champion Jinku Oda. Jinku Oda is really quite an entertaining fighter. Some cool flying knee knockouts and stuff like that. But Stoyan is he's a meat and potatoes guy. He's a great kickboxer. He's a great. This is a good fight for Stoyan, I would argue.
Yeah. So I mean, Stoyan, physically a real European style, if we can say that, very curiously low body fat percentage, quite tall for the weight. He's good, and I think his performance, winning that tournament was possibly the best I've seen him. Yep. But he does have, weaknesses. While he does have this tremendous leg dexterity, which I think goes a long way, especially when you're fairly tall, it gives him an extended reach, and he can use that not just at length but up close, and that's how he dropped Buakau. But you do see with his hands, he gets a bit loopy and floppy. And
Mm.
while I don't foresee that Oda is going to, be able to beat him, he's got less than 10 fights. But in the pocket, he does some nice things defensively. Like he knows where to put his hands. He defends himself. He's not just doing this stuff where he wings hooks. Like he has some idea what he wants to accomplish and the fact that people are going to punch him back. But he's not purely a boxer. He can kick as well, but I think he's going to be at a pronounced size disadvantage, not necessarily bulk wise. Like
Mm.
his big thing is, I think they call him the muscle tank or something. Like he does
Yeah.
strength and conditioning. He's a fairly, actually athletic guy, has some nice stuff. But I do think that this is one of those cases where he's from Team 3K, who you will know from Kaisei and Kensei Kondo. And Kaisei Kondo at this point has been completely ruined because they gave him bouts like this. So I think that's the real worry here, is that this is a guy who has some talent and potential, but with less than 10 fights, and you're putting him up against a top 10 guy. Now, Stoyan is not like a destroyer. He does not tend to knock people out. I think it was, like I said, it was a very good performance from him in that tournament. So, maybe this doesn't go so bad for Oda, but I do think this is one of those cases where they're putting a guy in for too much too soon, and it will, he has the potential to make it closer than one expects. But I don't think this does much for either guy and has tremendous potential downsides for Oda. But even if he has the best case scenario and he loses a close fight and shows some flashes of what he can do, like all that does for him is put him in an upper echelon up until he gets hurt and then they throw him down again. And I think, being from the team he's from, I have concerns about this.
Yeah, it's I like Stoyan. And Stoyan, with a different set of judges on a different night, he's number one in this weight class in the world. Like just narrow losses to the top guys in this weight class. It's just putting it all together at the right time. But yeah, this is a big step up for Jinku. But yeah, it is what it is. These things happen in the sport.
Yeah, like I would much rather have seen Oda against a guy like Jordann. Like that would have made more sense. But
look at that segue. Absolute professional work segue there. Dengue Silva is taking on Jordann Pikeur. Dengue Silva did well in the Grand Prix, exceeded everyone's expectations. Long, kicky boy. Jordann Pikeur it's just a matter of where he is physically and mentally. He hasn't fought for 2 years. He looked completely flat in his loss against Hiromi Wajima. Wasn't doing amazing before that. But Dengue Silva, I don't know if Jordan's at his best. He's got to beat Dengue Silva. I just don't know if he is at his best.
No, and I think he hasn't been at his best for quite some time. So obviously he had a very long layoff in COVID, got quite large, got back into shape, took a tune-up fight in Russia somewhere. And I believe he snapped his Achilles, and that's just an awful injury to come back from. He has come back, but he hasn't looked great doing it. He's also been a bit injury prone. So, Dengue has a particular set of liabilities himself. He's very wild. He, has a style and a body type that is very unusual for both the sport and the weight class. He way exceeded my expectations, and I find him very compelling to watch. I do expect him to win, but again, Jordann has he has beaten other fighters and he has beaten them badly, but that was back in the day, and I do wonder whether he has it, whether his heart is in it. But yeah, I do expect Dengue to take it, but there is always that potential that he is just trying too hard to do too much and gets nailed by a counter by a more seasoned professional.
Yeah, and that wouldn't be a surprise at all. And speaking of two different levels here, you have Hiromi Wajima essentially getting a tune-up fight against the debuting Kim Hua. Am I right?
Kim Jin Hua, yeah. So he's like, again, he's very short for the weight class, doesn't really belong in it. Like, as much as I talk about how Japan has been deprofessionalized since 2009, there was a time when there was a pretty good, like, nascent but domestic Korean scene, and K-1 would go there and they would support like local events. They would run tournaments. They had the Con. So this guy, I've seen his most recent fight, and he looks short and he looks very, very, very undercooked. And you know, Wajima is a guy that has had distinct troubles. He's not got a great chin. He's on a really, really disappointing run recently.
Yeah.
Verdonk just made him look stupid. The referees tried to help him as much as possible, like continually saying no down and making him get up. Like he's delicate in a way that is very difficult at the top level. This is very far from the top level. This is entirely because Wajima is an Osaka guy. They can find a guy that is like a soft touch pushover for him to push over and then speak to the crowd and say, you know, I'm back. It's not good matchmaking.
Yeah, and it's too bad because I think Kim maybe has potential, but this is a little bit too far too soon, right?
I mean, this is the problem: is that there is very little depth in the Korean scene. The places that it does manifest, you have two fairly good 53 to 55 kilo guys. They both just recently fought each other. One of those is the guy, I forget his name, who got, you know, knocked out with a body shot by Toki Tamaru within like 30 seconds.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. I forget too, but yeah.
But, you know, if you watch any of their events, it is a large mix of professional and semi-professional. And the problem then is if you are an agent and you get an offer from Japan, they are not offering you a fight to win. You are there to lose. You are there purely because of regional, racial, domestic, international animus. Like, they do not want to see you succeed.
Yep. I think that moniker really does work in the men's divisions, but it tends not to work in the women's division because they sign like pretty much random women from around the world to debut against their champions, and then Antonio wins. Or who was the young girl from Thailand who ended up beating Miyu? I forget her name.
Oh yeah.
Baya Hong. Just like, oh, she showed up out of nowhere, was 8 years old, and beat our champion. Shit. Oh, damn it.
Yeah, and then, you know, she dropped out of university to pursue fighting because of that success. And now she's having, you know, very limited success, and it's quite sad. But yeah, whether it was I think it was a couple of events ago, they signed a Korean girl to fight Kira Matsutani. And, you know, the Korean girl, very, very young, very early in her career. But, yeah, it's not compelling matchmaking. It's not of use to either fighter. The only people it really benefits are the completely disengaged audience on Abima who see the flags next to the names and say, "Oh, great, they beat a Korean." It's I find it is completely lost on the international audience outside of Asia. It is completely, you know, pointless. This is purely just to get Wajima back in the win column. And I don't think it does that in any meaningful way for him.
Oh, yeah.
But,
you know, yeah.
He knocks people out. I expect he will knock this guy out.
Yeah, and this guy is a good way to say it, unfortunately. Darryl Verdonk, the former Infusion, or maybe current Infusion, no one knows, will take on Zora Okapian. Zora Okapian was just in the 155-pound Grand Prix recently and had a really amazing fight against Kasper Mushinski. I think this is a very good fight for Zora Okapian, but maybe I'm wrong here. What do you think?
I feel like Okapian he's a good fighter. Like, I quite enjoyed his fight with Nachuk as well. But, you know, in that fight with Mushinski, you see that he has a lot of negative tendencies. So a lot of his fights don't have a lot of stuff going on in them. And one of the interesting dimensions to this fight is I look at Verdonk and I think, oh, he's a young guy, but actually Akapian is even younger than him. So I think this is a fight that probably wouldn't have been made if Mushinski was able to be on the card and wasn't injured. I think this just ends up being the guys that they ram together in the absence of that. So, we'll see how it goes. But honestly, even though I understand and I agree with the fact that Akapian is a good fighter, I don't really enjoy watching him that much. Verdonk, on the other hand, might be able to draw something new out of him because, like Mushinski, he is going to come forward a lot. So, like we saw in his fight with Dengue, he will throw caution to the wind and he will try and get those points and he will try and win. So yeah, I expect that it has the potential to be, a good scrappy fight, but I think they need to be careful matchmaking both of these guys and make sure that they understand what they have on their hands and what to do with it. And this also has the potential, especially depending on where they place intermissions and such, to be a bit of a long grinding affair.
Yeah, I know. It's sometimes you get the download for K-1 and it's somehow 35 gigabytes, 10 hours long.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the main card. That's all I really wanted to talk about. Is there anything else in the undercards, the multiple undercards that stuck out to you?
Yeah, a couple things, and I will talk about them with tremendous brevity. One is immediately preceding this match is Saho. She is very, very, very entertaining. I know a lot of people tune out for the women's fights, but please watch this one. It's good. Before that, one of my favorite fighters, Kenta Hayashi, is nearing the end of his career. Kensei Kondo is sort of not that great, but maybe they pull something out of each other. Like Hayashi is very rarely in a bad fight. It will probably be entertaining. Before that is Toma versus Shoki Kaneda. Shoki Kaneda just sort of dropped the ball a bit against Gunji, but he also beat the absolute hell out of Tatsuya Tsubakihara. Very, very impressive performance. Was it Gunji? No, it wasn't Gunji. I believe it was Takumi Terada, who is now the champion. Anyway, Shoki is a good fighter. Toma also a good fighter, but has issues with injury and such. But that I expect to be good. There is two more. Yuto Shinohara, people may remember him from getting kicked in the leg a lot and then uppercutted at the same time by Yuki Yoza. He's been a kind of dependable boxing heavy guy, maybe losing a bit more than usual the last few years against a very young man called Haru Furumiya. Furumiya was born with a hearing disability, wears a hearing aid. He fought on the K-1 reality show where they do this thing where they have like 3 versus 3 team battles, but if you win, you stay on. And he defeated the entire opposing team by himself. If you go to his k1.co.jp profile and watch his debut fight, it is the best fight you will ever see between an 0-0 and a 1-0 guy. I think he has tremendous, tremendous upside. However, he is coming off a loss, and this is a bigger step up for him than you would expect, but he's a guy you will hear about in the future.
So it was like a stay on the mat, like the same thing that Kazushi Sakuraba's grappling show was doing, the stay on the mat style where you fight the guy up if you win.
Yeah, exactly. And he beat 3 people in a row.
That's sick.
He's cool, yeah. And then lastly, the second match on this card is the Crush 51 kilo champion Dyna against some guy. I don't really care who his opponent is, but Dyna is really, 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 really good. Tremendous finisher at his weight class. He had 2 very, very incredibly close fights with Rui Okubo, who, just beat Masashi Kumura. He's really a fighter you should be watching.
They just put Big D. Not even, on one side they put Big Dream, and then they just put Big D for the rest. Big D.
We love Big D, don't we, folks?
Oh, I love Big D. Damn, that's decent. That's decent, man. Great job. Fantastic. This is why I wanted you on. I know we talked some crap about the overall sport and the event itself, but yeah, what's going on in your life?
I have a project releasing sometime next week that nobody else will care about. But yeah, you will see a photo, I expect, on social media of some sort. Don't get excited. Nothing to do with kickboxing.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Other than that, just you know, doing my day job, watching kickboxing occasionally, getting mad about it, finding it funny. It's yeah, so nothing to plug. Just eventually there will be another podcast about kickboxing. Whether that takes 2 years or not, who knows? But it's an interesting time for the sport. The business side of things is really unusual. There are plans afoot. I guess maybe I can come back on and talk about that. But shortly after this event, there's going to be this Japan Martial Arts Expo. There are plans in place.
Yeah.
Co-promotion potentially. So interesting place. Whether we get something off the caliber of the 70 kilo tournament or we get something of the caliber of the heavyweight tournament remains to be seen. But watch the space. Interesting stuff happening.
Oh, I agree with you, but it's funny. I asked how are you, and you were like, "Oh man, I don't know." It sucks when people ask about me when all I want to talk about is Yuki Kondo or Semi Schilt or something. Like, why are you asking about me? I'm boring.
Yeah, like honestly, I find the most tedious part of these things is, people want to say, "Oh, this is how I got started watching this." Like, I know how you got started watching this. It's the same thing that got everybody. Either a parent or something was like really weird and showed you combat sports, or your brain was ruined by the internet and you found combat sports. Like, it's not that complicated.
I saw a GIF on Sherdog forums, and turns out that was Buakaw, and here we are.
Yeah, and then I learned the conspiracy associated with that. The Japanese paid him money to lay down.
But it's so funny because the narrative is like he came into K-1 unknown 2004 and ran through everyone. And every time it comes up, you can see John Wayne Parr in the Instagram comments being like, "What? I don't think that's true."
Yeah, it's kind of I mean, this is a separate aside, but
yeah, sure.
When I was looking a while ago, like it used to be very easy to find photos and video of the VTR and stuff showing the X-ray of Jerome Le Banner's arm.
Oh yeah.
You can't find that anymore. Like there are very simple bits of information that are just no longer easy to find. And I think it does change the perspective of history because those finer granular details are just not there. It becomes, wins and losses. And that doesn't tell the whole story.
Well, that's why you're so important and you need to come back to the space. Actually, just come back to this show. It's actually so much easier for both of us, isn't it? This is pretty good.
I would love to, because then I don't have to do the editing.
And I don't have to do the research. So this is perfect.
Match made in heaven.
Look at us. All right. It's a match. Hey, thanks so much for your time. Have a good week and we'll talk to you soon, bro.